All right, welcome to another episode of The Accidental Landlord. I am your host, Peter McKenzie, and today we are talking about price gouging. And this is a little bit of a collision of my two worlds. So the reason we're having this conversation is because in our area, we had some pretty severe wildland fires, specifically the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire. Both of them down in Los Angeles County, one on the beach, one inland. But they were pretty devastating fires. Thousands of houses burned down, whole entire neighborhoods. It was really a mess. So for the people who know me, I was a firefighter, a captain with the fire department here in our town for 20 plus years. So I have some intimate firsthand knowledge of what fighting those fires and being on the front lines of those fires looks like. Obviously today we're not talking about that. We're talking about the effects of the wildfires on the rental market and what that looks like. The impact on these fires had on the community was insane. Like there was, thousands and thousands of structures burned down. Instantly, thousands of people are displaced. Whether they were renters or homeowners, doesn't really matter. They don't have a place to live. Immediately, overnight, literally, you don't have a place to go to. Hopefully, people have family in other areas they can go to. Not always the case. Sometimes your entire family lives in a neighborhood. So the demand on the rental market is almost instantaneous. Literally, your house burns down, you are on the phone the second, you're safe and you're starting to look, where am I going to put my family? Where are we going to lay our head tomorrow night? So the surge in rental demand has a very dramatic effect on the rental market. Obviously, the rental market is controlled by supply and demand. Literally, overnight, you're constricting the supply in probably the fastest way anybody ever knows how it could be constricted. So the state of California has laws against price gouging. And these typically come into effect when a state of emergency is declared. The state of emergency was declared fairly quickly because it's in the government's best interest to do that for a lot of reasons, not just price gouging, but it opens up funding for federal funds and state funds. And so, we can get resources that we need to not only put the fire out, but then deal with the aftermath and all the things that go along with that. But we're here to talk about the price gouging related to the rental market. And let's set the stage. Los Angeles is already a horrible rental market. There's already a constricted supply of rental properties. Prices are already sky high. There's already a lot of competition for rental properties. This was before the fires. So the second the fires happened, it made it 10 times worse. So we now have this crazy rental demand. The state of California comes in and enacts their state of emergency, which enacts this price gouging code that's in the law. Essentially what the law says, let's kind of go over what it is. It's Penal Code Section 396, and basically it caps price increases at 10% for 30 days post-emergency. So that's just not pricing on rental. That's hotels, groceries, anything that people will, have a potential to abuse is what's capped. They also cap if let's just say you have a house in a nearby area that wasn't a rental, but you go, oh, wow, there's all these people looking for houses. I'm going to go stay with, my aunt in another state. I'll rent my house and make a fortune. Well, they've capped that too. New listings after the emergency, they set it at 160% of the HUD's fair market rent for the area. I wish that there was no need for these laws. I wish that the government was just overreaching and putting a law that never even really need to exist. And a lot of the times, we throw shade at a lot of the regulations that we have in California here on the podcast. In this case, unfortunately, I think this law is necessary because there are unscrupulous people who do want to take advantage of this tragedy. And my personal opinion and the opinion of our company here and the way we look at this issue is it's wrong. We should not be doubling, tripling, quadrupling rents just because we can, because somebody is suffering arguably one of the worst days of their life where they lose their house. And hopefully they don't lose, somebody they love or a pet or something along those lines. But I'm here to tell you that is not the case. Not everybody has the same view that we have here. I think for the most part, people are good and most people understand that and aren't trying to take advantage of people. But there are people who do. And we talk to them. And we've had conversations with people who want us to manage a property all of a sudden, and they want to ask $10,000 a month in rent when the actual rents for a property like that is $3,500. We've had those conversations. It's disappointing. I'm disappointed in people when they think that that's a good idea, but it happens. And that's why this law exists. And in that respects, this is a good law. Essentially, it's you can't raise it more than 10%, and there's a couple exceptions, which we'll get into that. But these laws do a good thing for people who are displaced, and it's not just long-term rentals; it's also short-term rentals, Airbnbs, short-term leases. One of the areas that gets really weird, which is sometimes not the landlord's fault necessarily, although they are held liable, is insurance companies. And let's just back up a second and talk about what happens when your house burns to the ground. When your house burns to the ground and you have insurance coverage, hopefully, some of these people didn't have insurance coverage, which is a different topic because the insurance markets in California are such a disaster. Some people just decide to go without because either they can't find an insurance company that's willing to cover the house, or the premiums are so astronomical that they can't afford it. So let's just assume you have insurance. So house burns to the ground, you make a claim against the policy. Let's just, for sake of argument, say it's $1 million policy. So you have $1 million of coverage to rebuild your house. Most policies will cover your living expenses while you're not in your house, but that comes from that $1 million. So now the insurance company is on the hook to pay rent for you. Well, guess what? Everybody else and their mother in that area is looking for a rental too. So what do the insurance companies do? The insurance companies will sometimes offer premiums to the landlord to get them to accept their policy holders. A lot of the times, and we've seen this also, and this happens outside of emergency times too. For example, if there's a flood in your house and you made a claim against your insurance policy, they're going to put you up in a new house. Well, they know that most people don't want to hassle with dealing with an insurance company because, let's be honest, most people can't stand insurance companies because of how they operate and denying claims and making it difficult for people. So the insurance companies will arbitrarily go, oh, I see the rent's $3,000. We'll offer you $7,000 or $8,000 if you take our policy holders and put them up in your house. And a lot of landlords go, that sounds great. Yeah, we'll take you. Well, the law doesn't allow that. And the difference in this particular fire, which I thought was interesting, kind of unfortunate as well, is this was a high-profile area with multi-million-dollar houses, a lot of which were occupied by very famous people and connected politicians. The Attorney General is being extremely aggressive. So they have come out and fined and or gone after insurance companies and the landlords that agree to this, because it is in direct violation of the law. Some people think in their head, hey, this only applies to a landlord that's trying to take advantage of somebody. This doesn't apply to an insurance company. That is not accurate. And if you own a rental property and an insurance company comes to you and offers to pay you more than 10% of what it's worth, you should absolutely say no and don't go for it, because the Attorney General is going after people that are doing that. So the reason that this is a bummer for people whose house burned down is they have a finite amount of money that insurance company is going to cover. Let's just use $1 million, which is probably relatively normal, especially the areas where these houses burn down. If you want to go put your house up your family up in a comparable house, let's say it's $10,000 a month and your insurance company goes, we'll pay 15. Understand that 15 is coming out of that $1 million. So if you live there for 2 years, because let's be honest, these houses are going to take 1 to 3 years to be built, that's $360,000 that's coming out of your payout for your policy, which is going to leave you roughly, $700,000 to rebuild your house? Well, if your house can't get rebuilt for $700,000, which probably is not the case, most people are underinsured, not overinsured, now you just wasted a third or a quarter of your payout on rent, especially because you were overpaying for it. That's why they try to prevent this, because you want to preserve your policy to rebuild your house, not go stay in a hotel for 2 years or an overpriced rental property. So that's why they're going after the insurance companies as well. And the other thing that you will see as a landlord is people are desperate when they don't have a place for their family to be. Their house burned to the ground. You'll have potential tenants start bidding against each other. Be very careful if you're a landlord, because just because you have two people that are willing to pay more and they're competing with each other doesn't mean that you're not going to be held accountable for breaking the law. You absolutely will. That's what's going on. That's the impact. Let's talk about how the state is investigating this, enforcing this. And this is the piece that I've never seen before in my 20 years of the fire department and dealing with fires and wildfires and all these things, and being in the rental business for 10 plus years. This one is getting so much notoriety, so much activity from the media because, this is just my personal opinion, because we're talking about famous people and politicians whose houses are burning down, that the government is being very, very aggressive. And it's not just the government. So the California Department of Justice put a task force together. They're aggressively pursuing landlords. So they have already issued over 650 warning letters, potentially with criminal charges being considered if they don't comply or get on board. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, which is the controlling agency in LA, are saying that a landlord faces a fine up to $50,000 if they break the law regarding this. Now, with those penalties and all the things we've talked about, you think people wouldn't be doing this. Well, the reality is there are groups that literally have sprung up that are targeting bad landlords who are doing this. In some of the data they're putting out, there's over 1,300 rental listings violated the law in just 11 days after the fire. That's a lot of people that are taking, in my opinion, unnecessary risks and doing the wrong thing. $92 million in illegal overcharges of rent in Los Angeles alone. These officials are probably taking advantage of these organizations that are springing up to shine a light on this stuff and using it to their advantage. Go on Zillow or anything around this, it's in bold letters. This is the law. Do not do this. Do not do that. If you go on the Attorney General's websites, they also say, we want you to report anytime you see X, Y, Z. So they're making it extremely easy for people for tenants or anybody really to report bad landlords. And frankly, I think that's a good thing because it's, landlords don't always have the best reputation. And I think a lot of the reason why is there are bad actors and people who do the wrong thing, this being a very clear and specific example. Zillow is helping with this. Obviously, they don't control exactly everything that goes through, but they're doing their part when you go on their site to take a look at rentals. They're making it very clear what the law is and how to do something if somebody is not following the law. So a couple case studies. We don't have names, and some of these things aren't really settled yet, but there was a well-known property owner in Los Angeles that tried to triple rent prices immediately after the fire. Got some pretty aggressive public backlash because if you do this, it's not like you're living in a hole and no one's going to know. You're literally advertising things that everybody knows you're potentially not supposed to be doing. They were forced to roll back their rental rates and settle with the tenants. That just is so unnecessary. You're damaging your reputation, which if you're in business, reputations are very valuable to the business owners. And make no mistake, if you have rental property, you are in the rental business, and now they're potentially having to pay the tenants money to settle these claims. Not a spot you want to be in. This one we kind of referenced earlier. There was a group of landlords that accepted over-the-limit payments from insurance companies, believing that they were exempt when they actually weren't. So the state investigators launched the inquiry, levied steep fines and potential criminal charges against some of them. So don't do it. It's not worth it. Let's talk about exceptions to the price gouging laws. There are some. They're not very many. They're very limited. When and how you can raise the rent in excess of the 10%. So the main one is if you have repairs, you can amortize the repairs and the improvements that may push you over the 10%. So if the rental increase reflects necessary repairs or upgrades, then the landlord may exceed the 10% cap. Now, know that since this is a politically hot button issue, I'd be pretty leery if I was going to get too aggressive with this. It's probably not a good idea. Not to say you couldn't raise the rent in the future once the emergency is lifted, but if you do or are going to go down this route, I would highly suggest that you document it thoroughly so that you can justify what you're doing when you're doing it. What are the best practices? How should you stay compliant if you have a rental property in an area covered by this? And by the way, we manage in Ventura County, which is literally right next door to Los Angeles County. So our county is covered under this state of emergency. The state of California actually has a website that goes over all the state of emergencies that are in effect and their locations, usually county by county. And you'd be surprised. State of emergencies get called for all kinds of things. Atmospheric river flooding comes in with the rainy season. Sometimes they call that a state of emergency. Or there's just random things in there that you wouldn't consider a state of emergency that the state of California does. So make sure if you're in the rental business that's one of the places you check. Now, if you work with a company or somebody, a real estate professional that understands these things, they generally keep up on that for you. But if you're doing it on your own, which a lot of landlords do this on their own, just know that that resource is out there and that these rules kick in, not just from these fires, but a lot of other things. So what's the best practice to navigate around these price gouging laws to keep you out of trouble? One, audit your rental price. Make sure all your increases are within the legal limits. We're in the state of emergency. Don't get aggressive with rent increases. If you do want to raise the rent above the 10%, justify the rent increase. Records of the repairs or the improvements and the lease terms that support what you're trying to do. The other key part of this is you need to monitor the legal updates. So stay informed. The California Attorney General puts updates. Los Angeles County supervisors, all these governments have their hands in updating what the rules are. Not all of them agree with each other, but it doesn't matter. They all have authority in some way, shape, or form that affects your business. Stay up on it. And in a perfect world, you follow the rules the first time. You rent your property out to someone who lost their house. You follow the increased laws, and then you're done, and you don't have to worry about it. How long the emergency lasts is up to the authorities. They can extend it, I think, 30 days at a time or sometimes 180 days at a time. There is controversy around how long they leave some of these states of emergencies in place. For example, 3 years from now, if the state of emergency from the fires we just had is in place, that might seem a little excessive. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Just know that just because it's not in the news anymore and we're not hearing about it doesn't mean that it still exists. It's on you as the landlord to make sure that if you're going to raise the rent, that the emergency's been lifted. In my personal experience, they leave these emergencies in place much longer than common sense would tell you to leave them in place. Right or wrong, I don't know, but what you would expect, oh yeah, that was a year ago, we should be behind us. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the emergency's still there. So let's talk about why being ethical and doing the right thing when it comes to pricing your rental property surrounding these state of emergencies is the right thing to do. Outside of just following the law, which, we here at least, we follow the law to the letter because it's what we have to do. But unfair rental practices, it damages the reputation of the landlord. It creates distrust with you and your tenants. Your tenant is your customer. If you are literally trying to take advantage of your tenant, it just starts the relationship off on the wrong foot. It could be as bad as criminal charges against you and, settlements with your tenants, or just, this doesn't feel right, starts off on the wrong foot, and then, you have a tenant who doesn't trust the landlord doesn't trust the tenant, maintenance requests, accusations. We've been in this business a long time. When there's no trust, it's bad for everybody. The good thing that this law does is it kind of stabilizes the rent prices in the communities around the disaster. That's a good thing. We don't want somebody paying $10,000 and the neighbor who was there before the fire started paying $2,000. That doesn't make any sense. It kind of stabilizes the community after the disaster. It's our belief that long-term success in this business comes from being fair, transparent, compliant, treating people right, whether that's a tenant or a vendor or a fellow landlord. People need to do the right thing. It's not rocket science. It's disappointing when people see opportunities to take advantage of people because something as terrible as what's going on. Don't be that person. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Know that California is aggressively going after landlords who are raising the rents more than they should. Don't price gouge people. It's going to lead to legal action, criminal charges, fines, all of the above. You have to proactively make sure that you're in compliance, keep records, and document everything. And then lastly, it's more than just a legal issue. In our mind, it's an ethical issue. Do the right thing. Let's not take advantage of people who lost their house. They already, arguably, are dealing with a terrible situation that was out of their control. They had nothing to do with, why their house burned to the ground. Let's do the right thing and try to take care of and help people that are in times of need. So, are you a landlord that's navigating some of these rental pricing laws and things that are going on? Want some help with it? If you're in the Ventura County area, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to have a conversation with you, help you stay compliant, protect your business so you can survive these states of emergencies and these curveballs that get thrown your way, which is, sometimes it's a very difficult business to be in, the business of being a landlord. So contact us today. We're happy to offer help and see what we can do for you. As always, thanks for your time. Appreciate the trust you give us in listening to us about these topics, and hopefully you find some value in them and you can operate your business a little bit better than you did before.